Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Albert Beck, and I'll be your host for the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation's Dialogue in honor of Indigenous History Month and Pride Month. Before we start, I'd like to ask Charlotte Nolin to start us with an opening prayer.
Kinaskumtin, Ukumnao, Mosunao, Kinaskumtin, Kikanowski. Kinaskumtin, Niwimagan, Scraping Metishwan, Equa Wapitski, Whispea, Equa, a snipusquamustus, Equa, Pimtimusqua. Creator, grandmothers, grandfathers, I give thanks for this day, and I humbly ask you to look after my relatives. Fort Sacred. Give thanks for the blessings of creation. I give thanks for my four-legged relatives, winged ones, those that swim, those that crawl. Give thanks for Muslim Peaceum, for shining brightly on us and providing warmth and growth. I give thanks, Kukum Peaceum, balance that provides in each and every one of us, and that's medicine Nipi. And I ask you, Creator, grandmothers, grandfathers, bless all of my relatives from the sacred directions and help them on their journeys. If I've forgotten anything, Creator, please accept them in my
Thank you, Charlotte. It's always important when we gather that we start the event in a ceremonial way. And so I just want to thank you for that. Again, my name is Albert Beck, and I will be your host. I am a citizen of the Red River Métis. My traditional territory is Treaty 1 and the home of the Métis homeland. And I'm currently broadcasting from the Algonquin territory, the unceded, unsurrendered territory in what is known as Ottawa. And so today, the NCTR Dialogue series first started in 2020 in response to the need of virtual events due to the pandemic. Our inaugural event from June 2020 was on two-spirit perspectives of the calls to action. In June 2021, we talked about the spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional state of our two-spirit communities. So this year, our June dialogue is centered around acknowledging how far we've come in educating, identifying the two-spirit role in our communities. And the conversations have been had, what actions need to be taken next. So we're gonna come together and we're gonna have that conversation today. And I'm joined by three incredible voices from across Canada. Again, we have Charlotte Nolin and Preston Thotin-awāsis and Alexa Keleutak. I think I got that right. I hope I did. And so before we begin, I just want to let the audience know that it's going to be a question process. We will ask a series of questions, and then you will also have an opportunity to ask questions, and you can put your questions into the, in the chat. So, I'd like to ask Charlotte to begin just by introducing yourself, and I'll go to the next.
Bonjour. Hainista Nipawis Kapskalki Huesquia. Equa, Mikusumas Temen Pipstat. Equa. Udni Dodem. Red River Valley Dochin. Testawudni Yel Hotipi Miswak. Greetings, my relatives. I announced myself by the names that I carry: Stand Strong, Eagle Woman, Red Horse Running, and Charlotte. And I refer to myself as a two-spirit Métis woman. I'm from the Red River Valley, which is now Winnipeg, and it's an honor for me to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Charlotte, for being part of today's discussion. I'm going to ask Preston to introduce himself.
Thank you, Charlotte, for the prayer. So, tanse everyone. Preston is Sigasan. I'm at Chiwistungonik Ochinida. My name is Prestin Thotin-awāsis. I grew up in Stanley Mission, Saskatchewan, located on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis. I'm currently residing in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, which is still in Treaty 6, so I didn't wander too far off. But I'm just really honored to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Preston, again, for being part of today's discussion. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your perspectives today. I want to welcome and ask Alexa to introduce herself.
Ulukut, Alexa Keleutak nguvunga, hokta me nguvunga, manale mantra me nguyunga. Good day, everyone. My name is Alexa Keleutak. I am originally from Hokta, Quebec. Currently living in Montreal on the unceded territory of Tkaksayt. It's very nice to be here. Good to see everyone again.
Yes, it's wonderful. Thank you, Alexa. And again, I'm really happy that you've also chose to join us. I just wanted to recognize that we have the three nations in this circle that we are coming together today. And also we're ensuring that we have the voices of our youth, our adults, and our elders. So I think it's going to be a really, really great conversation today. And it just really, really warm-hearted in terms of the language I'm hearing. You speak your language, and I think that's such a beautiful way to bring all that in. I think culture and language and ceremony are very important in how we live our daily lives. So I'm really happy to have all of you here today, and I look forward to the conversation. So this is Indigenous History Month, and so let's start there. We talk about reclamation of our culture, and I guess I'll ask the question to all of you, and we'll start in you can answer them in the succession of your introduction. So we'll go with Charlotte, and then Preston, and then Alexa. So the question is, what was the role of Two-Spirit people in our communities?
Now we're looking historically.
Yes, we're looking at historically. Yeah.
We had many roles. What we've learned is that we played many parts. We were caregivers, that if a couple was to pass away, they would look after the children and raise the children. We were medicine people, that we were taught from a young age how to look after the plants and what they were used for and what healing they would bring to the people. We were warriors. Some of us went into battle, and ceremony people, that which has been passed down through the ages. We looked after the sweat lodges, other ceremonies, some of which are no longer, available because history that a lot of them, when they were banned, became obsolete, that nobody could remember them. The one thing I've learned in my years is that when you get a whole bunch of elders together and they start talking about the old days, that some of these things start coming back. So good to bring the elders together so that they can reclaim these ceremonies and bring them forward to the young people coming up behind them. So we had a special place in our communities, that we were given a place of honor. And unfortunately, through the influx of people into this country, that and religious groups that came in, that we were deemed to not be worthy, that we should not even exist. I was having that discussion this morning with some people, and I shared with them that, we were here then, and we are here today, and we will be here tomorrow.
Thank you.
Can't get rid of us.
No, they certainly haven't. And I think that the education piece is such an important part of this process in terms of the resurgence of the 2SLGBTQI plus and indigiqueer. We know now that even our language is changing, and even our perceptions around 2S, right? And I know that the Indian residential school system had an impact on our identity in a community, and I wonder if Preston, if you could tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that impact.
Yeah. First, I just wanted to say like how awesome I think it is that Indigenous History Month is also Pride Month. And I think it's a really good time to start that conversation and what it means to reclaim and make space for Two-Spirit people. But in regards to the impacts, I think it varies depending on where you are. And I always try to share with people that although we have come so far, we have to be very careful in acknowledging that it's not always that way on reserves or in rural communities, though we have come a very long way. But the impacts have been like monumental. There's not even a measurement. And I think Charlotte really spoke to that, especially in terms of like the loss of some of the ceremonies and teachings that we can now almost only pray for. Not to say they're not there, they are there, and people do share them. There's a lot of knowledges that are they still exist, right? We're here, they live in us. It's really hard for me to summarize the impacts it has had. I think the general population can understand, especially Indigenous communities, how residential schools have impacted our communities. And I think it's just another step further for how much it's affected the 2SLGBTQIA+ community. But I think it's a really important dialogue that we need to have. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think you touched on a little bit, we all went to a gathering in Toronto that was focused on the Two-Spirit action plan that's part of the MMIWG. And, even that particular inquiry really just missed the mark in terms of inclusion of the Two-Spirit community. And we, luckily through the advocacy of some of our movers and shakers in the community, that narrative changed. And so we're now sort of sitting in a space now where we're beginning to look at the implementation of the 2SLGBTQIA+ action plan, which really is around, has a strong education piece, but it also has a more of a holistic approach to preventing violence and against Two-Spirit, to this Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ and indigiqueer. I'm using these terminologies because not everybody actually relates to the Two-Spirit terminology, and I've learned a lot from Alexa around that. And I know that I think sometimes it's a very personal, when we identify ourselves, it's very personal. And so, when we start talking about reclamation on a personal level, Alexa, what has been your experience around reclamation of your culture in the context?
In the context, there's a lot being done today to reclaim culture, especially for Inuit that identify as being Two-Spirit, lesbian, gay, trans, queer, everything. It's harder for us simply because our colonization happened quickly and effectively. So we've lost a lot of information during colonization for us. So I think the earliest date would be in like the 1880s is when we started seeing a lot of colonizers in the area for whaling. And it wasn't until the 1930s, 1940s that we were told stop moving around. You now live a sedentary life. But even to this day, like before my grandmother passed, she kept it a secret that she knew her elders that were not Christian, that were not considered straight, that were shamans and caregivers. They were mothers and fathers. So we're slowly going back to that. I mean, to this, like using myself as an example, I have adopted my cousin's child. It is now my child. And I won't ever say, this is my adoptive child. This is my child now.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that took forever for the government to realize it's a traditional adoption thing that happens within Inuit communities. We adopt within the family.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't take care of a child. And it usually ends up being, someone like me. Best way to identify myself, aromantic, bisexual. So I would never see myself with a partner. It's not considered like the norm, I guess, for non-Indigenous people. So it's just a thing for Inuit. I know plenty of people that have adopted children before they ever got into a relationship. So there's that way of reclaiming of what we had lost. I could go on forever.
Yeah, well, I really love it when you share, because I learn a lot as we come together. The purpose
Mm-hmm.
of this is to really share those perspectives, and I really appreciate it. I personally look at reclamation as a personal process that is really sort of intrinsic to our own peoples and our own nations, and it's a process for many of us that have either gone through residential schools or through the child welfare system, or through colonization, as aggressive as it happened in the Inuit community, right? And so, when we sort of have that conversation about reclamation, we are really sort of really thinking about, not necessarily what sometimes we look at what we've lost, but we also have to be grateful for the things that we already have, that we still have, right? And I think, Preston, you mentioned a little bit about that around, there is knowledge keepers, there are language speakers and so forth in our communities that are that we're really tapping into. And sometimes they're very overworked. I feel sorry for them sometimes, because many of us, including when I was your age, is really hungry for language, hungry for history, hungry for a lot of information, and taking that to the next level. And I think, from the youth perspective, and I've spoken with Preston about this on a number at one of the conferences, the gathering in Toronto. Youth are ready. They're ready to take this on. And what's really important for us is older adults and elders is to pass the knowledge on and let you guys take that to the next level. And an example of that is how the language is changing and how our cultures are changing in different ways. But the true teachings that we have are sort of those core things. So, okay, so let's move on to the next part of our conversation. And it's really around, there's been some significant strides have been made over the years in the Two-Spirit community. Like I said, many conversations have been had. And I guess the question is, how do we continue the conversation? And, from what you've observed and experienced, what are the biggest challenges the 2SLGBTQ+ and Indigenous queer communities continue to face? And what are the opportunities? And I'm going to just open up the floor to anybody who wants to, chime in. Okay, I'm going to point out, I'm going to say, Charlotte.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, there's been a lot of innovative work and a lot of discussions that have taken place in the last 30 plus years. I mean, just look at the term Two-Spirit, where that evolved from and where it is today. I've watched the movement that when it emerged and then it started flowing out across Turtle Island. And today we have Two-Spirit groups right across Turtle Island. I mean, we have powwows, we have celebrations, we have ceremony, we have venues for the young people to really get out there and showcase who they are as Two-Spirit. It's taken a lot of work though for this to come out, and we have to thank those founding individuals that took the bull by the horn and said who we are. This is truly who we are. It encompasses all of our being, and to be able to stand up straight with our heads held high and to walk forward in society and say, here we are, we're back. We weren't totally obliterated, but now we're out and we're strong and we're growing stronger. I mean, when you look at the Two-Spirit movement that has exploded in the last 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, it's just really, like, I feel so good about that because I know that our youth, you know, who've had to face suicide rates like no other group of people have. And now they're being told, you do matter. We love you. You're part of our family, part of our community, and we're going to be there for you. So I can envision our suicide rates slowly getting lower and lower each year. And the more we grow, the more these young people know that they belong to a family. I mean, I look at the schools now where they're being protected in the schools, and there's young children, 6, 7, 8 years old. They're saying, this is who I am, you know? You gave me a title when I was born, but this is who I am. And more parents are supporting their children, helping them, you know, evolve and grow. And can you imagine what it'll be like in 50 years, 100 years from now? That the Two-Spirit people of Turtle Island and, you know, are just going to be out there and say, this is who we are, you know.
Mhm.
And people will learn to accept us. People will learn to respect us. People will learn to invite us into their circles. So it's a huge movement, and I'm glad to be part of it. And my role as an elder is to share what I know with the young people, help them understand who they are, to help them grab that culture, grab those ceremonies, grab the whole being of being Two-Spirit and walk with that. Huge steps.
Yes, I think you're right, Charlotte. There has been a lot of movement, and I can say probably from experience that a lot of this comes from the HIV/AIDS pandemic and the response from the community, the Two-Spirit community. That's where, you know, I sort of got introduced to the Two-Spirit community is through the HIV movement. And so we have a lot of the movers and shakers that really advanced sexual health, sexual reproduction, gender, sexual orientation narratives through those particular, through that time. But I guess the question I have to the other two, is it enough? Is what's being done, is it enough? And I'm gonna ask Alexa, is it enough?
No. No.
All right.
Just because if I look at like my job, a lot of what I do is education and advocacy and planning and all this kinds of stuff, but there's never going to be enough people that could do the same thing I do, which is advocate, educate, and get things started and going. Community work is really hard. The moment you try to engage a community, it's an uphill battle. It really is. So can we try as hard as we can? Yes. Is it always going to be enough though? That's the thing. There's not enough bodies to do the good work that needs to be done.
Thank you, Alexa. Preston, what are your thoughts? Are we doing enough? Is it enough, or can we do more? I always play the devil's advocate, just, because I think we do see a lot of movement in different ways, but I think from a youth perspective, I've spoken to you about things, and our youth are using different mediums to communicate with our community through social media. I know you are a little bit of an influencer. I always do that. I do that too. I know that you are, I believe, on TikTok. And so, is what's going on, is it enough? I know, again, we talked about sort of some of the things that are going on today. And as youth are starting to pick up the reins, what do you think is sort of a deficit, and what things do you think need to be, how can we move those things forward?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Everyone, those, like, just to piggyback off of what everyone's saying, I also don't think it's enough. I think seeds have been planted though. And I think in certain areas they're growing a little bit faster, but there's still some that lack, that nurturing light and water, but it's there. Whether or not it's growing is yet to be seen. I really think we need to reframe language around allyship and start talking about being good relatives. It's more about being a good relative to your 2SLGBTQIA+ kin. Like, we are your kin, and we need people to catch up with that concept. Lots of work has been done. It's amazing. I think social media has really helped push the movement and inclusion a bit further. We've had so much grassroots and amazing people doing this work on the ground for so many years. And one of the beautiful things about social media is it kind of like speeds that up a bit. It gets it out there quicker. And it's not to discredit anyone's work, but it definitely helps get the message out there. So yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, or what I would like to leave people, is like just to think about being a good relative, because everyone likes calling themselves an ally, but I think that's a very easy way to escape accountability if you carry any, homophobia, transphobia. So that's my biggest thing right now, is just how can we ensure everyone's being a good relative to each other.
Yeah, I think you tap into the not, at the non-colonial kind of approach from, when we think about our structures in our families, our kinship structures and our relations that we have in terms of, our philosophies and our ways of life, Indigenous ways of life. It's really about the interconnectedness and following those different ways of living through being respectful and being mindful and being courageous and all the other different teachings that we have. And one of that is really around part of that is around accepting and, being caring and loving to each other. And I mean, when we talk to each other, it's interesting in the gay community, I'll say, hi girlfriend, or hi girl, or, hi sister, And it's really, that's a kinship. Those are languages that, in a way is, sort of trying to reconnect and be a good example. And I think in the Two-Spirit community, that's something that, we sort of need to continue to sort of focus on, as being a good example. When we're good examples in our families, in our communities, it sort of kind of ricochets out to the rest of the community. And when we talk about allyship, it's really, that terminology to me is a bit problematic in my view. I think being a good relative is more familiar, family, more in that realm. So I know that we also talked a little bit about, you mentioned something about, or talked about social media and how that information gets out to, to the masses. And I certainly know many of us, including in my age group, and I know I think Charlotte's on Facebook. I don't know if Charlotte has all the other ones like TikTok and all those other things, but us older ones, we're using Facebook. We're probably still stuck. I got TikTok. I'm pretty proud of myself. Because I'm trying to find all these influencers, and I spend probably too much time probably in front of TikTok because I like those sound bites. I don't like things that are super long. The messages that are coming out, some of the things that are being discussed is two minutes or even two minutes and less. And that's what people are looking for. It's not a big long spiel that goes on forever, because people's schedules are really important. But I think the demographics for those particular and the reach out on these messaging is a good opportunity to do education and build awareness on 2S, LGBTQI plus and indigenous issues. And when we talk a little bit about, is it too much or is it too little, I sort of sit on the fence with what's going on, because as a person that's going into my older ages, and I know I can't speak for Charlotte, but we've seen the horrors and we've seen the really nastiness, having to be buddy up if you want to walk down the street, or how we were treated in institutions and so forth. And those institutions are still there. And if we look at what's going on with missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, those are products of these colonial constructs that really have impacted all Indigenous lives. And so, when I think about what would the world look like in 20 or 30 years, I'm praying that, that we say that the Two-Spirit people is the medicine, is the solution to all this, because we certainly have the ability to navigate and flow through the different scenarios and different places to create what I always feel is the balance within the community, to be able to sort of bring that back into space. But we are battling the colonial and binary teachings through the church system or through government agencies that really sort of continue to sort of impact our children. And our children are still being scooped. They're still being, taken away from their families, from their communities, and so forth. So, and it's particularly for me, when we think about our 2SLGBTQI plus and indigenous queer folks in our communities, those impacts are even, greater, just simply because of the stigma and discrimination, homophobia, sexism, the whole misogynism, the whole gamma that we would be experiencing if we are living our way. So I think I want to thank you a little bit about that. I think we've sort of kind of looked at that, looked at some of the work that we've done and sort of the work that needs to sort of continue. And I think some of the mechanisms that we are really focusing on around education and the use of social media, and even just reconnecting with each other. Well, there's Miss Jackie. I should introduce Miss Jackie. She is super cute. There she is. And seriously, this little one has been part of my life since she was a little baby, and I'm just watching her grow up. And those are beautiful little energies. So I'm just really happy to see that. See how we got off course? Little energies, beautiful energies. So yeah, so we know we've talked a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the opportunities. And I think one of the things that we wanted to sort of talk a little bit about more is around, it's been about a year since the framework of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons was launched. And I'm wondering, in your sphere of work or where you are working, what is your sort of, has any of this impacted you? Some of the, there was a number of action plans. One is more specific to 2S. And I sit on the 2S committee, and we've met with Two-Spirit people, and we brought them together in Toronto in April to discuss and to go over some of the aspects and some of the priorities that Two-Spirit people are asking from governments, especially the federal government. And I know the provincial government is also on the hook, and our Indigenous governments are also on the hook for that. And I'm just, the framework around the Two-Spirit, the action plan really speaks about some of the priorities that really need to be moving forward. And I'm just curious to know, has any of that had any impact on your lives? And maybe I'll start off with Preston, maybe. And if you haven't, then maybe you can give a bit of your impression of the gathering that we had.
Yeah. It's had so I work with victim services, and I've done this work for about 6 years. And in doing that work, I've been to a lot of gatherings and events focused on MMIW, and I'm intentionally leaving 2S out because that's what they do to us. And I think that is something we need to work on as people, as relatives. There's just so much work that needs to be done moving forward in that capacity. And I feel like 2S is always almost pushed to the side nationally. And I'm very intentional about bringing these conversations up to some of the organizations that I'm around. And it's just about calling that in and having these conversations and dialogues. But Two-Spirit people, I find we're always added on to women's organizations. And I think it's really challenging that we're competing for, those pots of money and funding and grants with women's organizations when we don't always have the same disparities and issues and challenges. And not to take away from what Indigenous women are going through, because we know what they're going through. But we also, on this side, we have our own barriers and challenges that aren't represented, I guess might be the right word, by women's organizations. And even further, when you're hiring Indigenous people, how are you ensuring they're inclusive of Two-Spirit identities? Because not every Indigenous person is going to be respecting that aspect. I think I went a little off topic, but I know in the beginning as well, you had shared, where do you see it in 30 years? And I think it's going to be beautiful. I think we've entered an era of like Two-Spirit. We're here now. Like we've always been here, but we're here now. Mm-hmm. And we're here to help. Like we're here to reclaim those parts in the circle. And I think it's it's so beautiful to be part of, because we know the healing we bring to our communities, but it's time for our communities to bring that healing back home and, welcome it back home. And I truly believe, like what Charlotte was saying, that the suicide rates are going to start going down when we start being more accepting of our community members. So that's what I envision in 30 years is, just healthy kinship, healthy communities that are inclusive of everyone, and going back to the old ways that people often leave us out of, and they think we weren't part of that. But, our languages prove that otherwise, our creation stories prove that otherwise. So I think it's just really beautiful. It's a beautiful time to be alive as a Two-Spirit person right now. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a bit, and I like it when we go off and go wherever we need to go. That's what I love about these conversations. And you know, like I said, around the framework, like there is a number of many things. In fact, Alexis sits on that committee with me, and we know that that there's a lot of work that needs to be done for anything, including even the TRC's calls to action, and and some of the recommendations that come from the MMIWG, and I'm going to add 2S then, because we were added later on, and I agree with you. It's still a thorn in my heel, to be, even some of the conversations that are being had when they're talking about it continues to miss out in 2S. But I think, so I just went off topic. But anyway, I think it's really, when we look at, the work that needs to be done, the magnitude of work that needs to be done, it's sometimes it's very overwhelming. And I know, like I said, me and Alexa sit on this committee for the Two-Spirit implementation action plan. And, it's trying to almost herd a bunch of cats to get them all into one area. And then, hopefully they'll be able to sort of go in that direction. And the government is just so big that when you're trying to talk with one person, the other one's not talking to each other. So those kind of things actually, when we start to talk about, when we're having these conversations around these calls of action or these recommendations, we completely forget that this is a matter of life and death, that these action plans that need to be created and these recommendations that came from the community and these meetings that we have and all the things that we do, at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is it's about saving lives. And I've heard that come from a number of individuals that are, advocates in the Two-Spirit LGBTQ and Indigenous queer community. I mean, it's about life and death. This is how specific it is. And so when we are really sort of working in and getting out there and trying to move on these different things, we need to be sort of mindful of that. And so, I think what you guys have really shared is really important for those that are sitting with us and listening to us today, is to really take that home, is to really think about that. So I guess, we talked a little bit about the needs that need to be done to support the 2S LGBTQ relations. And we talked a little bit about the allies, and this, we talked a little bit about being a good relative. And I think, we haven't really talked, I want to talk a little bit about youth. Because I know that our youth are the up and coming. We have two beautiful youth in our panel today that are working in the community, that are really moving forward on some of the things that we, as older folks, have been talking about for 30 some years or maybe more. I'm not dating myself because it's not my birthday. And by the way, it's Preston's birthday. So happy birthday, Preston.
Birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. But I think, when we start to really kind of look at sort of the youth perspective, I'm kind of wondering, is there any recommendations on supports family and community can provide to the 2S LGBTQ youth? And I guess I know that when I look at when I'm sort of where I'm going with this kind of question is it's really about what kind of recommendations what was your experience and recommendations that you would have to the youth perspective. And so maybe I'll ask Preston.
Okay. Specifically, I guess from my experience, I really would recommend Indigenous organizations, whether that be like tribal councils and grand councils and, bands and Métis nations, all the way down to like business, like a coffee shop, everyone needs to be making not just safe spaces, but inclusive spaces where 2SLGBTQI plus and Indigenous queer folks are not just welcome, but feel, you know, like safe. And I think people get lost in like a safe space. Just because you slap a pride button or a pride logo, you know, on your window doesn't mean anything to me and my safety, depending on where you're at in that journey. So, but yeah, again, it all comes back to being a good relative, and regardless if it's in government or whether it's just in conversation with your friends and family, like we have to be forward thinking. You know, we always hear that science is catching up to Indigenous knowledges. Well, so is gender. Like the understanding of gender diversity is still catching up to Indigenous knowledges because that's always been there. So, and again, I went a little off topic, but I think ultimately it all boils down to kinship for me, relation building, and inclusion. Those would be the recommendations I put forward. And also don't wait for queer organizations, Two-Spirit organizations to do that work. If you want that work to be done in your organization, request, you know, Two-Spirit people to help you do that, or 2SLGBTQI folks to help come in and orchestrate that. But don't wait for the very underfunded 2SLGBTQI plus organizations to do that work for you. We are part of your community, so that is part of the community response. So that's what I would say to that question. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. No, it's good. I like it when we go off all over the place. Again, I appreciate the comments, and I think you know, like we're people, we're supports there. I think there's still need for more family supports, but I think you give a sort of a good sort of approach and places where we could go, and some cautionary notations around, you know, we see the little pride flag in places doesn't really necessarily mean that it's a safe space. So I think we're going to go, I'm going to continue moving along. I'm pretty sure we probably have about 6 minutes left. I'm going to move to some questions. We did get some questions from the audience, and one is specifically to Alexa. You had mentioned that you struggle with not having enough people to help advocate and educate. What resources, if any, do you think need to be made accessible and available to help with this?
I think a lot of what needs to be made available and more accessible is capacity, really. That's the number one thing. It really is the number one thing. And the fact is, a lot of the times we do our work with no pay, volunteer time, or, you know, we get paid in gifts, which is, sure, it's nice, but it doesn't pay my bills.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've heard repeatedly from many Keleutak, time is money. So if I'm spending my time doing that, it has to pay my bills somehow. I'm not the only one living in this house.
And I think you are 100%. I think everybody in the audience and by yourself and the panel would agree that the financial resources is definitely what needs to happen. And I think, you know, we were talking about this in the, you know, in the committee work that we do under the Two-Spirit Action Plan. And we've talked about dedicated funding resources. You know, currently the government doesn't even provide capacity dollars for Two-Spirit organizations to actually function. They're giving us all these program dollars, but there isn't any, you know, operational dollars to be able to stabilize and create a strong foundation. And even when they do get those programs and resources, they're not enough. And as we're starting to see, you know, I think 5 years ago, there might have been 3 or 4 Two-Spirit organizations. Maybe I might be wrong. I think there's like 12 now, or 13 or 15 now. They're just sprouting up everywhere. So the financial resources are going to be required to be able to move forward on that. And you're right. I mean, capacity, it's a monetary economy. You know, when I remember doing a lot of speaking engagements and participating in stuff like this, I used to do it for free. And, you know, now, you know, things are different. You know, I can advocate for myself and say, okay, you're going to have to show me the money. But I mean, I think we have a really deep passion for the work that we do. And so sometimes the monetary isn't really what we're sort of looking at, but it would be helpful to have more people. So, you know, like having 10 people supporting the work that you're doing sometimes may not be enough, but at least it's better than just one person. So I agree with you. I think that was a perfect response to that. We have another question. Hello, my friend is a two-spirit individual who was taken from the reserve at 3 years of age. A white British family adopted him. When he sought to make reconnections with his birth family, they shunned him. They are all survivors of the cultural genocide and suffer from severe addictions and other harms from the trauma. The task is not to remove stigma, but to show people how much they are loved. That is the challenge. No one should be shunned from their tribe due to their sexual nature. It is difficult for those who have been shunned because they feel like they do not belong. How do you make sure all peoples have a sense of belonging, especially when their heart has been broken? So maybe we can just maybe rephrase maybe around, how do you make sure you have a sense of belonging? Because I think, you know, if we can share that knowledge, it might be helpful to those that are out there that have been shunned. And we know through the HIV epidemic, I know many community members, including 2SLGBTQ indigenous folks that got infected with HIV or were, you know, disclosed that they were 2S. They were actually pushed out of their communities. And so this is maybe something that we could talk a little bit about. How do you make sure you have a sense of belonging in any case? Because I know we've all gone through our experience of disclosure in talking about that. So maybe I'll ask Alexa.
My child is yelling in the background.
Oh, okay.
It took a lot of work and a lot of self-thought for me to actually come out to family members,
Mm-hmm.
because they're very religious people, as many Inuit actually are. They're very religious. And at my coming out and telling them who I was and who I am meant that I had to become a teacher about any of the terms I was using. So it's a hard position to be in, because you're in a vulnerable place, but you have to be a teacher so that people understand who you are and what you're saying. But that's more making sure that you take care of yourself in that process, and that you take the time to take care of yourself and then come out and then talk to other people. It's hard.
Yeah, I think you've really captured, you know, the essence, and that is to take care of you. I think when you know, I'm a 60s group survivor, and I came home, and my experience was very different than from some of the experiences that I'm hearing from other communities. So it's an individual thing, but coming home, you really need to be aware that you need to take care of yourself, no matter what the circumstances and the situation is. And so I always tell people, you know, because I work in the field of repatriation, because we're really talking about repatriation to family, but we're also talking about repatriation to ourselves when we are beginning to discover and be able to identify who we are. It's really about taking care of yourself and making sure that you can try to put in this the support systems, or those that you trust, that circle of trust, or those good relatives that you can have surround you to be able to support you while you're going through it. And it's it's not an easy process. I mean, coming home, disclosing, it's a really difficult process, but it's really important that we take care of ourselves. Did anybody want to chime into that? Maybe? No? Okay, let's see. I think we have another question here. How would you encourage someone to come forward and ask questions, especially if they have a fear of misspeaking and offending someone? So I'm going to sort of, I think how I'm understanding this particular question, I think maybe it's around, I think it's about talking about or coming forward and discussing, like, I know that, the language that we use, 2SLGBTQ and indigiqueer, we say gender, non-conforming, sexual orientation, like there's all these different, the pronouns is another kind of conversation that we could have for a whole day. So I'm thinking is how would you encourage someone to come forward and ask questions, especially if they have a fear of misspeaking, offending somebody? So, I think maybe we go back to that whole idea of taking care of you. And I think most people that kind of get to that point where they're able to start asking questions have sort of gone through that process. Am I on something or not? Maybe,
Yeah.
Preston or Charlotte, maybe you can tell me a little bit. Where do you think I'm on the right? Am I in the right space?
How I approach people whenever I do a presentation and I leave an opening for questions, and people, 99.9% of the people are afraid to ask the question, because what if it's not posed the right way? What if it's the wrong words I use? I always tell people in life, what I've learned is that there's only one wrong question we can ever come up with. And that question is the one that we don't ask. If we don't ask that question, we go through our lives kicking ourselves in the butt. I should have, I could have asked it. So I always tell people, relax, ask those questions, because how else can we find answers for you? And a lot of times when people ask questions and the answer is given to them, they stop and say, oh my God, I knew that already. Because we carry the answers to all our questions. Each and every one of us carries the answers to our questions. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it takes somebody else to verbalize that for us so that we can understand and realize, yes, I knew that all along.
I think sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted to sort of re-narrow it, because I think I think those are good thoughts. I think one of the things that I was going to I think this question was really around being an ally, or what we are calling now being a good relative. So I think there's people that are going out there in the community and, like, for example, like, I'm laughing because it happened to me. I had a family member go, and this is my gay brother. It's just like, ooh, church. It's just like, no, this is my brother. But there was an accent on there, of course, and so I mean, I think maybe sort of the question now really is around, how can we encourage someone to come forward and ask questions, especially if they're fear of misspeaking, offending someone, as an ally. And I think I have so many answers to that, and you kind of covered a little bit about it, Charlotte, but I'm wondering, is there any thoughts around, around allyship or being a good relative?
To be a good relative is let the person know that you don't want to offend them, and that if you do offend them, You're truly sorry because you are ignorant of certain facts. But in order for us, for anybody to be a good relative, we need to take the past and put it back where it belongs, in the back, because we can't change the past. What we can do is change the present. And in the present form, we ask our allies to support us, to be there for us. And we're starting to see more and more of that. A good example, we're going out to the land this weekend to clean the land. And there's 28 people that are coming out. And not all of those people are from the 2SLGBT community. Probably half of them are allies, and they want to learn. They want to become aware of, the people around them. I always tell people, pause and reflect, 2 words to live by. Stop and think before you say or do anything. That way, when you put out that action or you put out those words, they'll come from here and not from here. I've tried to live my life that way for so long that I give thanks for this beautiful gift of my mind that Creator gave me. But I also realize that it gets mixed up sometimes because of everything that's out in the world. And so I rely on my heart, my spirit. When I speak words, that they come from there. When I put out my hands towards my relatives, that they are out there in a good way, respectful. So my answer is pause and reflect before you say anything or ask anything. Ask yourself, will this hurt that person? Will this offend them? And if you think that's what it's going to do, then don't ask, but try and find those words within yourself. Ask the question, but in a really good way.
So those are definitely words to live by. And thank you, Charlotte. I think, pause and reflect is usually what most of us should do anyway when we are going to do anything. And I can probably speak for myself. So we're coming towards the end of this wonderful panel discussion. And I wanted to just ask what message you'd like to send to the 2SLGBTQ plus and indigiqueer who are joining us today. So we'll start off with Alexa. What would your message would be you'd like to send?
I guess the big message is we love you, we accept you, and we want to see you again, always.
Perfect. Preston?
My message I would like to leave everyone with is center your healing. Because we can't control how everyone's going to react to who we are, but we can heal ourselves, so we're equipped to handle some of those hardships that we experience in life. So keep centering your healing. It's a lifelong journey, and keep being you. Be proud, be loud if you're safe. Yes.
Perfect. And Charlotte, what would your message be?
Be true to yourself. I had that encounter with this other individual the other day, and they were unsure of what they were doing and whether they should be themselves. And I said, once you learn to be true to yourself, you find that life is so beautiful. Many of us have lived in fear, lived in the darkness, and once we come out, and we learn to walk standing straight up and with our heads up, with pride, with honor, that life flows around you. And the beauty of creation, is there in front of you. So be true to yourself.
Perfect. Being true to yourself. I love that. That's a beautiful ending. Thank you, Charlotte. So before I go to our closing prayer, I just want to let those know that we are going to be ending our conversation here. For those who have had questions and we're not able to get, we weren't able to get to, the NCTR will be posting the video with those questions answered by our panelists. So on behalf of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, I would like to thank Charlotte and Preston and Alexa for joining us today. What is the best means for the audience members to get a hold of you if they so choose to? Are you guys on social media? Maybe what we can do is we can probably get them to send their questions to the NCTR, and then we can filter them through. I think that would be the best way. And if you want to get a hold of me, I'm probably on Facebook. So thank you to our audience for joining us today, and watch for the news on our next NCTR Dialogue. And so now I'd like to turn this over and invite Charlotte to close our session in a prayer.
Halfway. Magdayma, too. Can I ask him for the beautiful words that were shared? Can I ask him for my relatives? Sacred direct. Can I ask him for the gift of life and the blessings of creation? Can I ask him for the food, medicines, and our four-leggeds, winged ones, those that swim and those that crawl. Give thanks, Creator, grandmothers, grandfathers. I ask you to go and be with each of every one of my relatives who were here today, and those who couldn't make it. Bless them with a good life, a safe life, a loving life. Help them on their journeys so that those journeys are gentle and they're filled with love. If I've forgotten anything, Creator, please accept them in my silent prayers. That way I say, Yavino Kumakanak, Tut Maparate, Kose.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and take care.
See you guys.